And I apologize for not saying it in advance. The Climate Solutions Bill at the end, we know, is a big bill. I was not planning on or calling for a vote today. I knew there would be a hold, and we won't get back to it till next week, but I wanted to go through it and start the conversation. Then somebody can put a hold. So I'm not trying to rush this through to a vote today. I wanted to explain it a little further so people can prepare amendments. I did get a request to send it to subcommittee, but I thought through that, and I think we'd go through the same effort twice. And I think on that issue, explaining it once and taking it up, if we're going to have two discussions about it in committee, we don't need to send it to subcommittee. So there's no vote today. We'll take it up again next week, and we'll have time for amendments and no rush this week. Okay, that being said, let's start. We're going to try to go with a 4:30 hard stop or close to a hard stop. We might have a couple minutes after that, but I committed to that, and I want to hold to that. Okay, Senate Bill 21.
Senate Bill 21, Wetlands and Waterways, Riparian Rights, Prohibition on Termination or Impairment. This bill prohibits the Maryland Department of the Environment or the Board of Public Works from terminating or impairing the riparian rights of an individual, community association, or other entity through the application process for a permit or license to install a pier.
Yes,
thank you very much. In consultation with the chairman, the bill's not ready for prime time. I'm going to ask for an unfavorable vote at this moment and recognize it may come over from the House in a different manner, and if not, we'll take it up again next year. Move unfavorable.
Is there a second?
Just procedurally, historically, we don't bring a House bill over if we've marked it unfavorable here. Should we withdraw it opposed to an unfavorable so we have an opportunity for a House bill? That's maybe more for the sponsor.
Not, if it is an exact cross-file, we won't hear it. I'm not convinced the other bills are exact cross-file. At least one is not, maybe two. So I wouldn't rule out us taking it up again. Look, you're a member of the committee. If we can work something out, I want to work something out. I'm not here to screw anybody, or excuse the language we're on. So it doesn't have to, we can vote no. If there's a different bill and it passes into the Senate, we will consider it. If it's an exact cross-file, we will not. Okay, we need a second.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry. Yes, Senator.
I just wanted just more a procedural question between withdrawing and unfavorable. Is there, does a bill sponsor have the opportunity to withdraw instead of an unfavorable? I see that on reports coming out of other committees.
The first answer is yes. Anybody can withdraw a bill prior to a vote, even prior to a hearing. So yes, anybody can withdraw a vote, okay. Withdraw a legislation. Okay. That being said, and I've tried to share this with people, that a bill gets an unfavorable shouldn't be seen as, a scarlet letter on their chest. And I think we have 3,000 bills. Our committee gets hundreds of bills. I can't tell you how many bills have been unfavorable in my lifetime that I've received. I think we have to have a culture where we can say this is not a great bill and we're not going to send it to the floor with a favorable recommendation. That being said, if someone wants to withdraw it, they can withdraw it. So anyway.
I just really want to understand the difference.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second for the unfavorable? Senator Gallion, discussion? Seeing none. Well, you want to fight like a tiger and vote? Okay. Okay. I understand. I want to be. I understand. Okay. Seeing that no one will be voting against the unfavorable, the bill receives an unfavorable and will not be actively taken to the floor. Next bill. That quick, in my heavens.
Senate Bill 82, State Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists, Maryland Music Therapists Act. We did hold this over from Wednesday. This bill requires the licensure of music therapists by January 1st, 2022 by the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists. It delineates what the practice of music therapy is and a non-exhaustive list. It establishes licensing qualifications, education, training, clinical hour requirements, and creates expiration, renewal, suspension, and revocation procedures for said license. The bill establishes a sunset review under the Maryland Program Evaluation Act, establishes the Music Therapist Advisory Committee, and consequently provides for its terms, leadership, responsibilities, and its meetings. The bill requires the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists to oversee licensure and ethics of the licensees and to set reasonable fees. There is a sponsor amendment. I think we reviewed that amendment on Wednesday. So just to reiterate what the amendment does, it transfers the licensed music therapist from under the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists and takes it to the Board of Examiners for audiologists, hearing aid dispensers, and speech-language pathologists. It renames that subtitle to Board of Examiners for audiologists, hearing aid dispensers, and speech-language pathologists to add music therapists. It removes the Music Therapist Advisory Committee and instead adds 2 licensed music therapist seats to the Board of Examiners. It provides that the governor appoint these seats. Under the amendment, a person may hold a bachelor's or its equivalent, including clinical training, and thus the amendment removes the 1,200-hour clinical training requirement for licensure. The amendment also removes the sunset review and permits the board to disseminate music therapy information to licensed music therapists. Additional testimony from Board of Examiners for audiologists, hearing aid dispensers, and speech-language pathologists that was not available for your review originally was disseminated on yesterday. In the testimony, the board states that they approved the bill with the sponsor amendments that are before you.
Okay, is there a motion on the bill? It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Yeah, I just want to be clear, and if people didn't get it, the audiologist had no problem. In other words, one of the outstanding questions was shifting it to the audiology board. Did they know? Did they care? And my understanding is they've been checked with and they're fine with it. Senator Carrozza, I'm sorry, and then the Vice Chair.
I just want to understand, the other day we had amendments from Senator Augustine. Now we have another whole set. Are these all now combined? Are they all sponsor amendments? I understand they've been cleared with the, is it the audiologist, since we moved it from? I'm trying to understand what we had 2 days ago with this and what we just got, and if they're combined, and who's the sponsor amendment?
So the amendments in the packet are the same ones from Senator Augustine from my glance, and then we have the reprint of those same amendments.
Okay, so it's not like we're considering new amendments today.
This is
all from the other day.
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
And Vice Chair.
Chairman, I just wanted to let the committee know I was the one who suggested the hold because I wanted to check with Delegate Sample Hughes, who's been working on this issue for a very long time and has some expertise in the matter, and I just wanted to make sure that the left hand and the right hand were sort of working together on this. I've been assured that she likes these amendments, and so that is why I seconded Senator Washington's motion, and I support the bill as amended. Thank you, Alexis, for your work.
Let's have someone move the amendments. It's moved by the Vice Chair and seconded. These are the sponsor amendments. Ms. Foxworth just went over. Any objection to adding the amendments? Seeing none, the bill with the amendments is before you. Anybody want to discuss it? Anybody expecting to vote against it? Seeing none, it will be recorded as 10-0 and will be passed to the floor. Next.
Senate Bill 227, Water Pollution, Stormwater Management Regulations, and Watershed Implementation Plans, Review and Update. This bill requires the Maryland Department of the Environment, or MDE, to update specified stormwater management regulations and criteria once every 5 years to incorporate updated precipitation data. The first update must be proposed by January 1st, 2022. Additionally, any discharge permit issued pursuant to 9-323 of the Environment article after January 1st, 2022 must incorporate any new requirements and standards established under the updated regulations. Finally, MDE must submit a climate load allocation addendum to the Chesapeake Bay Total Maximum Daily Load Phase 3 Watershed Implementation Plan, as well as updated 2-year milestones to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency by December 31st, 2025. There are 2 sets of amendments in your packet. The first is on page 36 of the voting packet. This is amendment number 423-427/1 being offered by Senator Elfrith, this bill's sponsor. The amendment adds a definition of precipitation data, requires MDE's stormwater regulations to incorporate the most recent precipitation data, strikes language requiring MDE to update stormwater regulations on or before January 1st, 2022, clarifies language requiring MDE to periodically update stormwater regulations, requires MDE to report to the General Assembly on or before November 1st, 2021 on 1, the most recent precipitation data available, and 2, the Department's plans for updating stormwater regulations. After the initial report, the Department must report to the General Assembly on any revisions the Department intends to make to stormwater regulations before publishing the regulations. Finally, the amendment also adds the Maryland Emergency Management Agency and local governments to the list of stakeholders that MDE must consult before proposing stormwater regulations. The second amendment on page 46, this is amendment number 934430/1, is being offered by Senator Hester. This is essentially an amendment to Senator Elfrith's amendment. It contains identical language requiring MDE to report to the General Assembly regarding precipitation data and the Department's plans for updating regulations, but it adds a line specifically requiring the report to cover the Department's plans for immediately updating quantity control standards for watersheds where flood events occurred on or after January 1st, 2000. And that provision has sort of been highlighted in the margin for you. That's the only difference with that reporting requirement between Hester's amendment and the Elfrith amendment.
I assume that's the Ellicott City amendment.
I assume so too.
Okay. Let's get something in front of us. Is there a motion? The bill's been moved favorably. It's been moved and seconded. Senator Washington. Let's take up the Elfrith set of amendments that were just explained to us. Anybody want to move them?
Sure. Move the amendment.
It's been moved. It's been seconded on the Elfrith amendments. Discussion on the Elfrith amendments, which again can be found on 36 to 38, and then in the reprint. It's mostly centered, as you heard, about precipitation data. Senator Carrozza.
I know it was just read to us, but can you bottom line this for us as far as what these amendments, how they change the bill, and I just trying to understand that, what we're changing from the original bill.
Basically, these amendments are meant to be responsive, I think, to some of the concerns raised by both the MDE, the Department of the Environment, and MACO at the bill hearing. I have been trying to get some clarity from the amendment sponsor, whether those organizations have actually kind of signed off and said that these amendments address their concerns, which they have not provided that information yet. But so, for example, one of the things that this takes out that MDE had specifically had concerns about was originally the bill had required MDE to do a first update on the regulations on or before January 1st, 2022. This takes that out, so this is it's now, the bill is more generally about updating the precipitation data and reviewing and updating as needed the stormwater regulations based on that precipitation data every 5 years. And then, so instead of having that, that requirement that we have new amendments on or before a certain date, it instead replaces that requirement with this report requirement that says that the department has to come back and tell, because the department indicated that it's already going through this process of updating these regulations based off of the more recent precipitation data. So this would say that they need to report that back to the General Assembly. That's the big picture.
And we do not know if MACO supports the amendments?
We don't know. I have not heard confirmation whether or not they support the bill with the amendments, no.
Originally, they were down for favorable with amendments.
Correct.
And the MDE was information. And everybody else supported the bill.
I had a question about the other favorable with amendment.
Okay.
There was the commercial real estate that they were favorable with amendment. So did any of their concerns get in the sponsor amendments that dealt with the timeline, retroactive changes, or makeup of the group, including more people in there?
Let's look. I mean, so the amendments do change the makeup of the group, so they do include county government or local governments and the emergency management agency on the makeup of that group. And they also, one thing that is also changed, and I think I missed it in the overview of the amendments also change a provision in the bill that had said, let me find it. So originally, and this is if you look on page 45 of the voting packet and the reprint, the original language had said for a stormwater discharge permit issued under this article on or after January 1st, the department shall incorporate any new requirements and standards under the regulations. And this one, the new language instead says the department may not delay the implementation of any new requirements or standards established under regulations adopted under this act. So I think that was meant to, again, sort of soften that language a little bit so that it doesn't sound like we're retroactively applying to things that are currently in the works, but to still say that the department's not meant, shouldn't be the softer language delaying implementation of the new regulations.
So I think one of their concerns was the makeup of this, is it advisory or the commission, or stakeholders. So under the experience, they were asking if they could put someone with private sector design and construction experience. Right now we have academic institution, Chesapeake Bay Program, Chesapeake Bay Commission, MEMA, and local government. I guess we can address that after this or amend the amendment. I don't know how you want to handle that, Mr. Okay.
Take the first set of amendments from the sponsor. Any further debate on the Elfreth amendments? Will anybody be voting against them? It does expand the number of people on the commission, including local government. If no one will be objecting, we'll say they're adopted. Let's go to the Hester amendment, which is also in your packet, which includes flooding in the review and the data collection, and I think we can all assume it's the two 100 or 1,000 year floods that Ellicott City experienced. Somebody want to move that amendment? It's been moved. It's been seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, if no one objects, we adopt that amendment. So we're up to the bill as amended. Senator Simon I'll come back to you if you want.
Chairman. Yeah, I don't think this is a big ask for this. When I'm looking at the group that they propose, it says consult with the following groups and stakeholders. I don't think there's anything wrong with putting somebody with private sector design and construction experience, however legal could put that in there. We have a commission of justice and stakeholders with, a lot of them are just organizations, and we added 2 governmental agents on there. I think it would be good just as a balance. It's not just as for additional information to have that side in there as well. So I would like to move to add one more group to the stakeholders that they consult with, to whatever the,
Okay.
I didn't realize they didn't put an amendment in here.
And again, which group?
It is the, on page 43, line 20.
No, I know the list.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Who do you want to add?
It would be, however we can put this in language, they want the private sector design and construction experience, so.
Fine. Anybody object? This is stakeholders who they consult with, so it's not
Right.
even a decision-making group. Any objection to Senator Simon Ayer's proposed amendment? Seeing none, that's adopted. The bill as amended is before you. Discussion. Discussion. Seeing none, will anybody be voting in opposition? It'll be recorded then as a 10-0, and we'll go to the floor as such. Okay, next bill.
Senate Bill 239, this was held over from Wednesday's session. St. Mary's County Public and Non-Public Schools, prohibition on possession of tobacco products by minors. As drafted, this bill prohibits a minor from possessing a tobacco product at any time inside a school building or on school grounds in St. Mary's County. For a first offense, a violator must attend a tobacco cessation program. For a second and third or subsequent offense, a violator is subject to maximum civil penalties of $50 and $100 respectively. The sponsor offered an amendment which altered the penalties to take out the civil penalties for the second and third and subsequent offense, and for the first offense now requires a parent meeting. For the second offense, attendance at a tobacco cessation program, and for a third or subsequent offense, attendance at another tobacco cessation program and up to 4 hours of community service.
Thank you very much. So I'll be fighting like a tiger on this one. Bear with me. Senator Bailey talked to me about this issue and also sent all of us a letter. I have taken a single idea from a single constituent and worked it and tried to get a bill passed. I was very impressed that this is the second year this has been back. It's been at the request of the local school system. It's not an individual advocate. He's taken the idea, and we all recognize smoking is a serious health issue. But the issue is he worked with the superintendent, the school board, the county commissioners, the delegates, and the sheriff. Then he took it out to the public for public forum. I've not seen very many local bills worked as diligently as he has. Number two, he has provided us with data from the 2019 school year. His letter also referenced the fact that 25.8% of the students are African American or Hispanic, but they've only made up 19.5% of the referrals for tobacco products. So I am sensitive to issues that were brought up. The data doesn't support it for this one school year. And also the final line that I think he should have addressed a little bit more assertively is today, without this bill, suspension is the only tool, and we'd rather have the kids in school, even if they're being educated by a tobacco class, than being forced out due to a suspension or even an in-school suspension. It removes the ability for us to keep the students engaged. He wants the amendment. He says without it, it could hurt the kids. I'm inclined to recommend that we take his amendment, pass the bill with one of our committee amendments, and that would be a sunset and a reporting requirement so that the school system in St. Mary's County would give us the information to validate the continued appropriate implementation of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to move unfavorable, I guess, so that it can be on the floor before us, and then I want to speak, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second? Second discussion.
Thank you. Like Senator Riley, Senator Bailey talked to me. I suspect he got to most of us, and I have great affection for Senator Bailey, who used to serve on this committee and serves honorably to represent Southern Maryland. I know that he is well-intentioned in this bill and in all bills that he brings. I just want to say he said that I said that by introducing this bill that there were racial implications. I can't imagine that I said that, but I just want to say in public here that I was talking about the implications or the outcomes that I feared with this bill, and I believe that that's what I said. But whichever one, I just want to clarify, in no way do I think that Senator Bailey has any evil intent in this bill or in any way that he serves the residents of District 29. So I just want to put that on the table. And I will be opposing the bill out of fear of possible implications, negative implications. I do hope that kids don't smoke, but I don't think this is the right answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a feeling. I know that the procedure normally earlier in session is to only have one hold, but since we have, we're going to have a divided vote on this, and we have one of our committee members who is not able to be here today, I would wonder if you would accept a second hold on this so we could do it when we have the full committee here.
I mean, there are going to be times we don't have a full committee. And I have to tell you, I haven't talked to everybody or counted votes. I'd like to proceed. I mean, it's going to need 6 votes one way or the other. And I don't know where she was. I haven't talked to the senator on it. I'd like to proceed. We've had a hold. We're going to have a lot of bills. I want to keep our agenda moving because we're already backing up. We had 40 or 50 bills this week, and we're still on the week and a week and a half before. So I hear you, but I think we had a hold on. I think people are pretty clear on this bill and where they stand. But let's have some more discussion and we can revisit that. Senator Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. So I support having tobacco-free campuses, absolutely. But this is not the vehicle. Maryland law is not the vehicle. So there's a Public Health Law Center, which actually recommends school-based district board of education policy. The St. Mary's board can set a policy, quite a comprehensive policy that can articulate very clearly what this bill is doing. So individual districts can make this decision. So particularly because of the removal of those amendments, my unfavorable vote is not about the banning tobacco products at this moment. I am concerned about disparate impacts when we pass these types, so that's a reality. However, it's very clear that the school board, the St. Mary's School Board, can pass this, and I'll share it with you all after. I'll share it with the senator. But they can do quite comprehensive exclusions. They can require cessation notices. They can specifically, they can talk about a first violation of their policy. They can talk about a second violation. These are all things that the St. Mary's School Board can do itself. And it's their job to do these types of things. So, thank you.
Yeah, just following up on Senator Washington, it just confuses me. I mean, every school has a student code of conduct. I don't know if it's by school or by the county, which sets out the rules of the road. And if the first step is a parent conference, the school system's allowed to set up a parent conference. I think it's a great idea. You should confront it with the family head on. Right now, the local school can say you can't have these products on school property. I mean, that's not anything they can't do. Now, whether you can force them to a cessation program, I don't know. But the fact is, this bill doesn't show any enforcement either. I mean, if the kid says, I'm not going, even the bill has no enforcement. Do I want to suspend kids? Absolutely not. If you said, look, after the first conference, after the first situation, it's either suspension or cessation, I think the parents will say, you get the thing on Saturday morning. So I don't understand why St. Mary's can't act in this issue. We're not hearing it from other jurisdictions, so they have best practices. It's not like there are not other counties that are dealing with the very same issue. So I'm perplexed, so, I'm going to be voting no on this as well. Senator Ellis, Senator Washington, could you turn off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Spoke to Senator Bailey, and I agree with the sentiments of the Vice Chair, and I share those sentiments. Smoking, vaping is a serious issue. We as a society, we create these problems for our youth, and then we create more problems in trying to prevent them from getting trapped in the problems that we create with tobacco products, with vaping products. We allow, those products to be in the store with kid-friendly flavors. We allow guns to be sold in Walmart. We allow even say BB guns and pellet guns to be sold, and then there are a whole bunch of state laws. If even a kid conceal a play gun, a BB gun, that's a felony. And we just create these problems that create all these additional burdens on our youth who, really kids will be kids. I was one. And so I know what the issues are. So from cigarettes to guns to, tobacco products, we just create these problems. We have to look at a better way of dealing with them than facing them in the school, where I want kids to go to school just to learn and not to be faced with all these other issues. I understand this is a problem, but as a society, I think we have to really look at how we can attack these problems before we put it in our kids' laps.
Okay, hold it. The motion on the floor is an unfavorable, so if you want the bill, you'd vote red. If you think it should die, you vote green. A yes is unfavorable. A no is you want the bill. Okay, the bill receives an unfavorable. Yeah.
For Mike's, did the public hear the final vote? I think we should do that each time because we can't hear individually.
It's been announced as 6-4-1, 6 in favor of the unfavorable, 4 opposed to the unfavorable, and 1 absent. It receives an unfavorable, so it will not be reported actively to the floor for consideration. Next bill, please.
Senate Bill 266, Education, Voluntary Ethical Special Education Advocate Certificate Program. This bill requires the Maryland State Department of Education to establish and administer a voluntary ethical special education advocate certificate program by July 1, 2022. Applicants must apply to MSDE on a form that it requires and pay an application fee as set by the department.
The bill specifies qualifications that applicants must meet for certification and a process and requirements for renewal of certification. An individual who receives certification is authorized to represent to the public that the individual is a certified ethical special education advocate while their certificate is effective. There are no amendments, but there was opposition at the hearing.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. About an hour and a half ago, I received some additional proposed amendments for this bill. I would like for staff to have an opportunity to look them over, if they would. So I'd like to request a hold until next week on this bill, if I might.
That's fine. The, excuse me, the sponsor has asked for a hold. Yeah, I would encourage people to look at the testimony from in favor and against. Obviously, there may be more amendments that will be shared. There were very varied opinions on this from
Right.
people expert in the
Right.
field.
One amendment coming from Ways and Means, and I'd like to have a little bit more time.
No, absolutely. We're going to
Okay.
hold the bill.
Okay.
I was just
Okay.
encouraging the committee to review the testimony before we take it up again next week. Okay, that bill is on a hold. Senate Bill 266. Next, please.
Senate Bill 278. This bill is held over from last week. State Department of Education and Maryland Department of Health, Maryland School-Based Health Center Standards, Telehealth. This bill requires the State Department of Education and the Maryland Department of Health to authorize a healthcare practitioner at a school-based health center to provide services through telehealth consistent with the provisions of the Health Occupations article. The bill prohibits MSDE and MDH from 1, requiring an approved school-based health center to submit an application or seek approval to provide telehealth services, or 2, establish requirements for school-based health centers to provide telehealth that are inconsistent with specified current law. By July 1, 2021, the agencies must revise the school-based health center standards to reflect the requirements of the bill. This is an emergency bill. There are no amendments, and there's no opposition. Well, there was some opposition at the hearing.
I'll entertain a motion. It's been moved. Is there a second? Second, discussion. Madam Sponsor, you want to say anything or not necessary? Okay. Okay. The bill is, do we have to adopt the amendments? Or did we? No amendments. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Senator Patterson, followed by Senator Washington, followed by Senator Carrozza. Senator Gallion, did you have your hand up? Okay. Senator Washington. Okay. Now, Senator Carrozza, were you just stretching, or do you want to speak? Did I see your light on?
Play a little catch up, Mr. Chair. We're on 278. Is that correct? Okay, and how there were amendments that have been offered. What's that? Okay, I just was trying to figure out where we were in the process. Thank you.
Right now, the bill's on the floor. It's open to amendments. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so the committee knows, I agree with 99% of this bill, and I wanted to vote for it. But there are some issues with the scope of service in this bill. And from my conversations with the sponsor, I don't think she's willing to accept any amendments on compromise of scope. But I still wanted to bring it before the body and let us decide if that's what the body's will is. But I first had a couple questions, if I could ask the sponsor. So during the hearing, the advocates, specifically Robin Elliott, stated school-based health centers, or I'll call SBHCs, are primary care only for scrapes and bruises. She went on to say centers do not provide abortion services, and there is no intention for that to happen in the future. Again, at the hearing, I asked the sponsor if she would be open to an amendment to clarify that abortion services would not be included in telehealth in our schools. The sponsor responded I would need to have a conversation with the advocates. Given the advocates publicly stated that that is not their intention of the bill, if the sponsor knew telehealth school-based health centers were authorized to prescribe abortion-causing medications to students under this bill, would you be willing to amend the bill?
Senator Simonaire, thank you for your communication with me on this bill and generally your interest in collaborating. I also know that you and all of us share our commitment to telehealth, especially during a pandemic, which is a huge challenge. So there are three types of health care that school-based health centers can provide. Three kinds, and I'll say this lots of times if you miss it. Primary care, behavioral health care, and dental care. Those are the only things they used to provide. Those are the only things they would provide under telehealth. Primary care, behavioral health care, and dental care. Reproductive, pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, prenatal, none of that is included in primary care, behavioral care, or dental care. Any other kind of health care other than those three kinds gets referred to a specialist. Nothing in this bill changes any of that.
Okay. But you didn't answer the question. So if you knew it was going to be able to authorize abortion medication to students, would you be willing to take an amendment to clarify that?
It does not authorize abortion medication. It does not provide access to any gynecological pregnancy-related services because it only provides for, say it again, primary care, behavioral health care, and dental care. Gynecological care would be referred out. If you or one of your sister or daughter or niece or whomever either got pregnant or was hoping to be pregnant or needed pregnancy care and pregnancy services, she would go to a specialist. That's the same thing that should happen to young people, regardless of the issue. If it's related to pregnancy-related services and pregnancy-related issues, none of those are related to primary care, behavioral health care, or dental care.
I'll try one more time. I won't ask. I'll just try one more time.
No, Senator,
She's not answering the question.
Okay, wait. I
just said if she knew
Okay.
that it caused that, would she
Okay.
be willing to take an amendment? It's a very simple question.
Hold it. I want to get the right conversation going here. What I heard is that it is not covered, they don't provide that care, so it's a moot point. So I think what I hear you saying is hypothetically, and what I think I heard from the vice chair is those services are not provided. So she's not answering it because it's a hypothetical question, and in the real world, it's not needed. So, I mean, you can ask again, but I think I don't want us to go do this, he said, she said 12 more times, that's all.
I got it. I was going to try one more time to get the answer. Obviously, it doesn't seem that she wants to answer that question.
I think she answered it.
No,
In a
what she
different-
did
in
is
a
she
different-
gave her opinion of what services are there.
Okay.
And I simply said, if you are misinformed and you understood that that was the case, would you be willing to have an amendment? It's a very simple question. So I don't know why, it's very evasive. It's a very simple question.
Okay.
If you knew these services were able to be provided, would you take the amendment?
The services can't be provided, which is why I keep not
Okay.
being as more flexible with answering your question.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, I'll move on. Refer me where the scope of practice is for telehealth. Where's that defined?
There is no change from current law for the 86 school-based health centers and the services that they have been providing to students in 12 jurisdictions for 20 years. No changes.
Thank you.
The current law requires that both the healthcare professional and the student be in the same location. This bill just says if they need to be at home and the student needs to be at home, that's okay. It can be reimbursed, it can be covered, and the healthcare services can be provided.
Okay, I'll try to ask the question one more time to see if you can answer it. Where in the law or regulations is the scope of practice defined so we know what we're talking about as far as policy? This is your bill.
Yep.
I'm just asking where is the scope defined?
So, Senator, last year we passed an emergency bill. I think it was unanimous in the Senate. I don't remember what the vote was in the House. That was sponsored by me and Delegate Rosenberg that established parameters for telehealth in general. We relied on the Maryland State Department of Education to help roll that out for students around the state. They neglected to do that. And not only did they refuse to do that, but they set up barriers. And they've made it very hard so that very few folks, and I actually have a question, a better answer than I gave you on a question last week. If you get to that again, I do have a better answer. But if you look on page 1, Senator, lines 19 through 21, it talks about the uniform telehealth standards for all healthcare practitioners. That's doctors, that's in hospitals, that's in clinics, that's in all locations, and it makes it clear that that would also be in school-based health centers.
I won't belabor the point. I just wanted an answer. Let me share with the body what I found. So in my inquiries regarding where and what authorizes SBHCs as it relates to the scope of services, I found that there isn't one. That they occupy a strange place in law in that they aren't necessarily a creature of statute or regulation, meaning there are no limitations other than what the healthcare providers provide, which include a range of abortion services. In fact, the bill's preamble, it states the intent as wanting to, quote, ensuring that SBHCs are able to follow the same standards as other healthcare providers in the state. Additionally, when I asked the Department of Health a few questions, here's what I found. I said, would telehealth SBHCs be allowed to prescribe birth control? Yes, they are allowed to prescribe based on the local decision to have the service in their SBHC program. The extent of family planning services is locally determined. I asked, would they be able to provide the morning after pill abortion pill? Local decision. Would they be allowed to provide abortion services? They may or may not, local decision. Provide options for abortion counseling, abortion referral. Additionally, I talked to the Maryland State Department of Education, and they stated that the decision is to provide abortion services mentioned is a local one. The authorities under law are given to the locals to decide if they want to do it or not. This bill will allow locals to decide if they want to have abortion-causing medications prescribed to students. So that's the facts that we found to answer that. So knowing that, I would like to provide amendment, if I could hand it out. And if I could just talk to the amendment. That's fine.
Thank you very much.
May I proceed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Knowing what we know, I'm going to offer an amendment clarifying and ensuring abortion-causing services will not be provided to minors in our public schools, and I will request a roll call vote. I would like members to know and appreciate that abortion is a very hard choice for many adults, and I don't want to minimize how difficult a decision that is for some adults. But we are talking about minors, likely without parents' knowledge, having access to telehealth abortion-causing pills. Additionally, even if it is difficult, when we are setting policy about life and death, we should know that what the student is going through and the potential medical risk, especially in the telehealth environment which this bill proposes if the amendment is not accepted. And so you don't think I am providing biased information. This information comes right from Planned Parenthood website. And if I add a comment, I'll say note. And it talks about what happens during a medication abortion. The abortion pill process has several steps and includes 2 medicines. You take the first pill, the medicine stops the pregnancy, note baby, from growing. Some people feel nauseous and start bleeding after they take the pill, but this is not common. Your doctor or nurse may also give you antibiotics to take to prevent infection. There's a second pill. You'll take the pill right away or up to 48 hours after you take the first pill. Your doctor and nurse will let you know how and when to take it. Note, this is via telehealth. This medicine causes cramping and bleeding to empty your uterus. For most people, the cramping and bleeding usually starts 1 to 4 hours after taking the second pill. It's normal to see large blood clots up to the size of a lemon or clumps of tissue. Note, students visually see the baby parts when it's happening.
Yeah, Senator, I'm going to ask you to speak to the amendment, and I think some of the graphic things, I think, I'm not sure they're moving the conversation forward. If you believe that you don't want this process to take place, I'm not sure we have to spend a lot of time on explaining what an abortion looks like. That's all. I mean,
well, to be honest, I didn't know what abortion pill did, and so I think it's important when we're talking life and death policy that we have the facts before us. We can make an informed decision. I'm only going to take about 3-4 more minutes. I'm not going to take a huge amount of time.
Again, the amendment is totally in order, and we should talk about whether this explicit prohibition needs to happen or not.
I agree.
I think people are fairly clear whether they believe in reproductive rights or anti-abortion, however we describe it. I don't want to make this a forum for the ongoing debate that's been going on for 30 or 40 years, and we see pictures of this and that. I want to keep this on the policy philosophy without getting too graphic. I don't think that will help our conversation. I think we all have developed our own positions, and I think while people might be following us on YouTube, I think we're a policy group, and I think we can stay focused. So just keep that in mind.
Right.
As you
and I'll
continue.
try just to highlight the challenges with telehealth and how it affects a student as far as that and not having the doctor, nurse kind of thing, because I think that's directly related, not just to the quote-unquote abortion issue. There are other issues in telehealth where the student is typically by themselves, and they talk about the problems that they have and trauma of seeing this, whereas if they're in a clinic, they don't see the tissue coming out. And the actual abortion clinics are putting it on their website. But I'll leave it out. I'll take your advice, and I'll just stop on that. I think, but I will highlight, after I did some research on this, just the trauma to the student sitting there alone, having a medical abortion-causing pill, and having the abortion happen right in front of them, not in a clinic. They see the fetus come out, they have to deal with it, and they say that creates a lot of trauma for the student. And this bill would allow that, according to the Department of Department of Health and Maryland State of Education. So this is what we're working on. The advocates sat up there the other day, or virtually, and they said that is not the intention. All this amendment does is clarify that will not proceed in our public schools. And the other thing I would just put in there, at taxpayer dollars. Most people don't believe that's appropriate. Even pro-choice, there are many in that area that say you shouldn't use taxpayer dollars where people are passionate against it, that they should have to use their money for that. So I will move the amendment that would simply just say you cannot have abortion services under this telehealth, and then you include the other 99%. Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to let others speak to their reactions to Senator Simon Ayers' thing. I just want to correct the record on the facts. I'm going to say again, nothing in this bill changes the scope of services from what's been happening in the school-based health centers for up to 20 years. Okay, some of them have come online more recently. Senator Simon-Ayer did reference local control. What that means is that your local school board, your local county council members, your local commissioners are deciding what services are available. There are specifically 2 counties that allow birth control information to be given out, and that's because their local school boards voted on that. It's not everywhere. The idea that abortion-causing medication or abortion services are available because of this bill or could remotely be available because of this bill is just inaccurate. The funding, which he threw out at the end, I just want to remind you that every year we have that conversation in the state budget. Nothing in this bill changes any funding conversation. It's completely unrelated. And parental consent laws would still apply. And again, nothing in this bill, which only allows primary care, behavioral health care, and dental care, would be permitted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Gallion.
So a follow-up on that, Madam Vice Chair, if nothing in the bill would affect this anyway, why would the amendment hurt anything if it just clarifies?
Go ahead.
Yes, Senator. You know, and that leads into the question I was going to ask the sponsor of the amendment. We heard a moment ago that the current law allows for this to happen. If that's true, this amendment is just prohibiting it through telehealth. The implication is when this pandemic's over, that there's going to be abortions everywhere else. And this has been, have been around for 20 years, and this issue has not come up before. So my point being that here we are talking about prohibiting it for telehealth, but if it's a general practice and a general right, it's saying if you do it in person, it's okay. But it hasn't been happening in person. So I think that's what sort of, again, perplexes me, that here's something about restricting telehealth when the purpose originally was these kids who were sick or have asthma and were treated when school was on, but treatment stopped. And this bill was to clarify that this becomes anti-abortion for telehealth. But it's not even anti-abortion for all of these school-based health centers. So anyway, that's my interpretive answer from myself, not from the Vice Chair, to your question.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's fine. And thank you. I mean, I was shocked to find out that they could do that in our public schools currently. They were authorized to do that, to be honest with you, that they could provide.
That's up for debate, is all I'm saying. I'm not sure that's a fact.
Well, you made the claim.
No, I was just taking your assertion and broadening that to the logic of the conversation. I was not asserting that. I was repeating your assertion.
Right. And we've confirmed that through the departments. And I will be glad to co-sponsor a bill with you next year to address the whole issue. But I was shocked to find out that that is part of the authorization today. Maybe it was never intended, and this is just clarifying, saying that they can't. I keep hearing saying there's no intention, and then when we put an amendment in to clarify it, it's like, oh, I don't want that. So we'll take the vote and let it go where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to speak in support of the amendment. And I am someone who has enjoyed working with the Vice Chair on telehealth issues. But, you know, this question came up from the very beginning in the hearing. And we heard, again, to just underscore, when we heard there was no intention, And then when the Madam Vice Chair goes through and defines the three areas very clearly, to bring some light to the issue, then, just trying to get a clarifying amendment that just underscores that, it seems like a reasonable amendment. And for that reason, I will be supporting it.
Senator Kagan.
No.
Senator Lamb. Senator Ellis. Senator Gallion.
Yes.
Senator Carozza. Senator Washington. Senator Riley. Senator Patterson. Senator Simonaire. Senator Penske. 4-6.
Okay, the vote was 4 in favor, 6 against. The amendment dies. There's another amendment. Senator Simonaire. Take a minute to read it, and we'll have the senator explain it and speak on his behalf in just a second. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a simple amendment. It says that for any services provided to our students, that they will have parent or guardian oral or written consent for any services provided to them. That's all it is.
It's been moved and I assume seconded. Second. Okay, I just want to have it before us. Anybody want to speak to the amendment?
You want to start?
He did. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to encourage colleagues to please oppose this amendment. This sets up a slippery slope that removes students' privacy. So if they're getting asthma medication, if they're getting mental health care that they desperately need, students have HIPAA rights as well. Parental consent can be dealt with in another bill, another time. It is not needed for this. And again, this is not anything that is happening now, and nothing about this bill is going to change the services that are being provided now. I urge you to vote against the amendment.
Senator Gallion.
So just to be clear, a 13-year-old could be receiving some sort of telehealth and get some sort of treatment through that over the telephone, and their parents not know about it? That's okay with this?
That's correct. There are privacy laws, and students have access to primary care, behavioral health care, and dental care.
But they're not legally adults till they're 18, correct? When they can really be on their own, they're still under their parents if they're, like a 12-year-old child?
Again, A, that would either be another bill if you've got interest or issues in that, and B, this has been happening exactly this way for 20 years in 86 different healthcare locations around the state.
Well, my opinion on the amendment, even though that's been happening all those years, doesn't make it right. So I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Senator Washington.
Just for point of information, that it is across the country, more than 30 states allow minors to consent Again, my interaction with this has to do with homeless youth, et cetera, but we've expanded over the years abilities for minors to consent to medical services. So it is, again, assure you that this is not anything new, and in fact, it's something that children rights advocates have been fighting for over the last 10 years.
Senator Simon Ayer.
Thank you. And this is the problem I have with this bill. We get misinformation. The sponsor spoke passionately how this is not required. It's been going on for decades. Let me just read the fiscal note. It says basically the health practitioner can provide this. 1, verifies the identity of the patient. 2, discloses the patient health care name information. 3, and obtains oral or written consent from the patient or the patient's parent or guardian if required. They are doing it. It's just opposite what the sponsor just said. For 20 years they weren't doing it. They are doing it. The problem is they have an exception in there for abortion. So you were all told not to vote for this because they didn't do it for 20 years. That's completely inaccurate. And that's what frustrates me when we're trying to make serious policy, that you get facts like that, even from the sponsor, with all due respect. They don't understand what the bill's doing. And so this just simply says, even in the case that they get an abortion pill or whatever, the parents will be informed. That's all. Thank you.
Good.
Let me just jump in for one. But Senator, this simply does what happens on site. So in other words, if they needed consent on site, they will need it for this. It does not change the rest of the code and create a new section exclusive of all the other rights and responsibilities of school-based health centers, and they have been in existence for a number of years. So all of a sudden this jumps out with unique characteristics or unique problems, and that's why it's confusing that if they're going to follow the same practices that happen on site, and whatever rules and regulations and rules of the road that are followed and have been followed, I don't understand why all of a sudden we have to make variations. If there have not been complaints or there have not been concerns about reproductive rights and abortion pills or students being treated when they shouldn't have been treated. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Simon Ayer and I were both partially right. I just clarified that, so thank you for flagging that. So 16 or older, no consent. Mental health, behavioral health care, no consent. We really need them to have the privacy, the HIPAA rights to have those conversations because they may be struggling with a parent who could be abusing them and stuff. But the chairman is totally right that there would otherwise be no other change. So thank you.
I can only fix what's before us. Okay, this came up, this bill's before us, we have single subject rule. We can bring another bill in to fix the other area, but we have a moral obligation to fix what's before us. And this simply just says the parents will be involved, at least when they're getting, a prescription or whatever. I don't think it's a hard ask just to say parents of these young kids who are going to learn about reading, writing, and arithmetic would at least be consulted about this. And I ask you to move forward. Thank you. That's all I'll say.
The amendment before you is Senator Simon Ayer's most recent one, 278/723727/1. A yes vote supports the amendment. A no vote rejects the amendment. Roll call.
Senator Kagan?
No.
Senator Lamb? Senator Ellis? Senator Gallion?
Yes.
Senator Carozza?
Yes.
Senator Washington? No. Senator Riley?
Yes.
Senator Patterson?
No.
Senator Simon Ayer?
Yes.
And Senator Penske?
No.
4-6.
Okay, the vote, the amendment's rejected, 4 in favor, 6 against. Further amendments? Further amendments. Okay. The bill before you, I guess there are no amendments on it, right? Okay. So we have before us Senate Bill 308, is that right? No, I'm sorry. 278, let's do a roll call.
Senator Kagan.
Favorable.
Senator Lamb. Senator Ellis. Senator Gallion. No. Senator Carozza. No. Senator Washington. Yes. Senator Riley. Yes. Senator Patterson. I'm sorry. Yeah. Senator Simonaire. 731. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Senator Penske.
Yes.
731.
Okay, to repeat for YouTube, the vote is 7 in favor of the bill, 3 against, and 1 absent. Next bill, please.
And now we go to Senate Bill 308, Higher Education, Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Revisions. This bill expands eligibility for the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship to an applicant who enrolls in 1, a non-credit continuing education course focused on entrepreneurial activities or career development, or 2, a course due to being unemployed or laid off from employment through no fault of the individual. These applicants are not required to meet the grade point average requirements for an initial award of the current scholarship program. The governor must include an additional $3.5 million appropriation for the scholarship program in fiscal 2023. There is one amendment from Senator Pinsky, and I forgot which page on the packet it was here. Okay, sorry. 54, okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, starting on page 54 of your packet, essentially these amendments strike the majority of the bill, including the mandatory appropriation for fiscal 2023, and it leaves in an exemption for individuals who graduated from high school 5 or more years before and who are working or seeking work during those years. This exempts them from the grade point average requirements for an initial award of the current scholarship program.
First, get the bill before us. Is there a motion on the bill? It's been moved by Senator Ellis. Is there a second? Second, Senator Patterson. I will move the amendment. Is there a second? Let me just very briefly speak to the amendment. The bills came in, had $3.5 or $4 million price tag. And I spoke with Senator Ellis. There was a glitch between the Higher Education Commission not having a good rollout and not many people signing up for it. Then the community colleges reached out, and a lot of people signed up for it, and a lot of the money wasn't used from a year and a half ago, and Board of Public Works kicked out $8 million for COVID. So there's now a 2,000-person waiting list. The $15 million is fully back in as it's mandated to be in the budget. So I think we'll have less of a problem, although we still might have people on a waiting list. To get this money, you have to make less than $100,000 if you're an individual, or $150,000, which is a pretty decent threshold. So I would move removing some of the language, but I thought the one of the points the good senator made about people who've been in the workforce, come back for a retraining or whatever, or an AA degree, shouldn't have their GPA in high school from 5 or more years ago be held against them. So I thought that was a good idea of exempting them if they have the wherewithal to come back, however they were as a student. We should acknowledge that. So that's what my amendment does. Discussion on the amendment. Senator Simonaire.
Yeah, just putting it all together. So it's basically striking the bill, but you'd put a new provision in there that says if you've worked more than 5 years and you apply for the scholarship, you just don't have to have the GPA for initially getting in, and then once you're in, you have to maintain the GPA?
Yeah, they're two separate issues. And that was in the bill. I mean, the senator acknowledged that the GPA shouldn't be held against them. So
Right.
I don't know if we
I
use the
don't mind.
exact same language or we make some changes. Ms. Goodman can speak to that. So that stays in with explicit, we use a 5-year. I don't know if 5 years is right. I don't know if it should be 4 years or 6 years. Then the separate part is once they're in, I believe there is a requirement to maintain a certain grade average. I mean, look,
Yeah.
we have to balance between encouraging more people to get trained or get an AA degree, but it's also taxpayer money. We don't want people to use it and not go to class when someone else could have used that money. So it's a balancing act.
Okay.
And Ms. Goodman, if I don't have that right, please, you know better than I.
You have that right, Senator.
Okay.
Okay. Can I just follow up one more question? So I'm trying to remember because there's been different versions of it. So current law is that it's open up to any age. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Originally, the bill passed, you had to apply within 18 or 24 months after graduation. We talked about allowing people in the workforce to also utilize this. So a year or two afterwards, there was a bill to open it up to anybody, I believe, if they fit the other criteria.
Right.
Income, we wanted it for working in middle-income families. So right now, it does cover recent graduates or people in the workforce.
Okay, and last question. Is there a work requirement that you put in this, or it's just 5 years and later that they can come in? Because I know his original bill was people were out of work and they were trying, so I'm just trying to get the scope of.
So the amendment here, let me pull it up here, is that the thought behind Senator Ellis's bill originally was to encourage these individuals who may have been out in the workforce, they didn't have additional schooling, and they may have been laid off, to give them this opportunity for this money. We also discussed that there's some issues about coding in MHEC's award system for these types of programs, because of some are on a rolling basis and some are on a credit or on a semester system. So that creates some issues there. So there was an expense in the fiscal note for that too, reprogramming for that. But what this would allow these individuals who've been out working, maybe seeking employment about 5 years, where your grade point average in high school doesn't matter so much. And so, but they're working to better themselves and go back to school. This is kind of what they're getting at here.
Explicitly on the bottom page 54, employed or seeking employment. So if they were laid off and they had sought employment or had been employed, they're covered by this.
Okay, and I think that's good. I think that's good. Now she wants to go back to community college. My wife did. She became a therapist, massage therapist. She isn't in the workforce, but now she's going back. I'm just wondering why we're limiting to just you had to be in working to better improve yourself. Other people might have taken care of kids, right? And they want to get back in there.
Scenario. So I'm not sure we contemplated that scenario. I mean, at that point, you could say she was seeking employment and maybe she couldn't find something, and so she decided she wanted to go back to community college and enroll in the type of programs that are eligible under that particular, then she would qualify. But I mean, if you don't want to include the provisions about working or seeking employment, you could just, one of the things you could do is just say 5 years out or 6 years out or 7 years out of high school, then the grade point average just doesn't matter. It's a policy decision up to you or the committee.
And income might have excluded her anyway.
And I don't mean to belabor this, but it seems the further you get away from high school, the less relevant that GPA is, whether you're working or whatever. It's not as relevant. And I just don't know if that qualifier adds anything, but may limit some people, that's all.
thinking in that was that you didn't want people who'd been in a 4-year program who dropped out to come back and then take advantage of this money when you're trying to get at a certain population and give them a little bit of a boost in getting back into community college.
It's up to us, Senator Ellis.
Senator Salmonier, that point you brought up is very important for that stay-at-home mom who decided kids are at that age and ready to go back in. So that's an excellent point. So we want to get back to the community college because she wants to basically get a certificate to get an employment, so that's seeking employment. And could I just expand beyond stay-at-home moms? I always used to say that, and people say, hey, wait a minute, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And so we have those too, right? So any parent that stays at home, take care of the kids for a while, they want to go to community college, take a truck driver driving class, which my community college offers, or anything like that. You know, they're seeking employment, doing things to seek employment. I think it's kind of important because, you know, we do a lot of things at a community college. We can take a lot of, how should I say, classes that are not vocational. They're more, how should I say, I forgot the term for it, but fun classes. Forgive me if I step on anyone's toes, but, you know, we want this to be for those, especially hurt by this pandemic, who say, hey, let me look for something else to do career-wise. And that was the purpose of this bill.
Let me ask, I'm not sure, I mean, we could take out that second criteria if we want to address the issue Senator Salmonier raised. I'm not sure if you're speaking for or against that concern.
Well, I was just answering. I agree. We could take it out too if Senator Salmonier thinks it's important to take out, but I don't really think it is.
I missed the last part of that.
I don't really think it's important because that scenario Senator Salmonier presented would be that stay-at-home parent seeking classes to seek employment, so to speak.
But I think that's true, but I think as I read this, it had been employed or seeking employment during the 5-year period. Ms. Goodman, could you jump in here and help us?
So, first of all, I'm not wedded to any of this language, so if you want to edit it, you are more than welcome to edit it based on, again, the policy preference that you have. If what you're looking to do is just say that after a certain period of time, after graduation from high school, that GPA just does not represent what you wanted to represent in terms of qualifying for this scholarship, you could leave that language alone and then take out the second part. I think if you're trying to narrow it even further, that's what that second language does, is to try to get at a particular pool of individuals. So it's, again, the committee has to make a policy preference about which individuals they want to qualify under this scholarship.
Again, it's the will of the body. Let's make it, a couple people speak, and then we'll make a decision. Senator Salmonier and...
In my case, I won't get in trouble with my wife. I won't tell you how many years it's been. But I don't even know if we could find her GPA from high school, to be honest with you. But I'm not sure, like the example you gave with the person going to school and then he drops out and all that. I mean, he could be working at Chick-fil-A, and when he applies, he said, I'm seeking employment. There's nothing in here that ties it to what they're seeking. Like my wife went in for massage therapist. It doesn't say she has to be seeking employment in that area. It just says she was seeking employment at McDonald's. So I think, I'm not sure it adds, I think it accomplishes, if we take that out, it accomplishes what you're looking for, and then it doesn't limit it to other people. That's just my thought, and whatever the body wants to do.
There are other criteria, income criteria, maintaining a grade point. This was only people who've been out not having to rely on what they did in high school. If they're motivated now, it shouldn't matter. I mean, I'm fine with taking out number 2, if Senator Ellis, if you are. Okay, then we'll strike the second criteria. So it essentially says, look, if you've been out 5 years, that is not limiting criteria of what your grade point average was. Vice Chair.
Quick question. If someone started college, started a community college or something and dropped out or had a family or traveled or whatever, went to the military, are they in any way precluded? If they then decide that they want to start again?
Mr. Chair? It actually answers the Vice Chair's question. If you kept number 2 and want to then incorporate Senator Simon Ayers, wouldn't it be along the lines of either returning to a new field or, in other words, you could keep the fact that they were seeking employment, but maybe some of the stay-at-home moms and dads are coming back to do something entirely different.
As someone who helped write the original bill, it says if you're making under $100,000, you're a single mom, we'll say, and you want to come back to get an LPN or become a car mechanic or whatever, you can apply for this Promise Scholarship. It's the last dollar if you get other scholarships, and that's basically it. So while the center was addressing a number of issues, one of the issues was you shouldn't have their GPA exclude people. So I think we want to make this short and sweet and not try to slice it and dice it.
I agree. You're only other limited by what's required in the program already. So the types of degrees you're seeking or certificate you're seeking at the school is one of the qualifications, as well as the GPA, as well as the income threshold. So you're only limited by what's already in there, and this would just give, again, it would expand it just slightly for more individuals so they don't have to go hunting up their GPA from high school, 10 years after the fact.
Action from removing number 2 and having the appropriate renumbering. That's on page 54. Seeing no objection. Before you is the amendment on 54 and 55 as amended. Any objection to adopting that amendment? Seeing none, the bill as amended is before amended. Well, yes, the amendment was amended. The bill as amended is before you. Discussion. Yes, Senator.
Just to see where we are, basically what this bill does now, the concerns about the fiscal impact have been removed since it was noted that the money had been restored in the budget. I want to understand if we've addressed all the original fiscal concerns, and just bottom line at this point, what the bill does with your amended amendment. So
essentially, all of the fiscal impacts have been disappeared because the bill has been stricken. That includes the mention in the fiscal note of any programming costs, because we have stricken, or the bill now strikes the provisions that would open it up to different types of certificates where they have to reprogram their scholarship award program to allow for those individuals to be included. So those $60,000 costs are out. The mandatory appropriation, additional appropriation to the program of $3.5 million has been stricken. And what's left in the bill is now a provision that exempts individuals 5 years post-high school graduation from having to present a GPA of a specific threshold.
thank you.
Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, will anybody be voting against it? If not, mark it down as 10-0 and 1 absent. That bill will be taken to the floor. Next bill. 351 was requested hold, which whether it's Senator Freyhester or mine, we're just going to put it on a hold till next week. Next bill.
The bills that we're putting on hold, because I noticed there was one on the floor, Senate floor earlier today, and now this one. Is this because we have a couple different bills moving and we're now trying to pull them back to, to work through them for one vehicle? There was something else that was pulled and this, so I'm just trying to understand if we have different bills that we're now just trying to consolidate into one bill on these different subjects.
We pulled because it was another cybersecurity bill, and we have multiples of those, and we aren't clear if they fit together or not. Today's bill, we found out, our council spoke with finance council, there's a bill that was 80% the same bill, but ours had some differences to it and some amendments that put it closer to our purview than finance. And I wanted to work out, we don't want to have two of the same bills that are 80% the same and one doesn't quite fit. So the finance bill and the bill 314 or something, I don't know, whatever the number was, that was a separate issue. So this was a simple voting session hold by a committee member till our next voting session.
So we have two, the one cybersecurity, which was, as I recall, departmental bill. That's kind of being held.
No, was it re-referred? Recommitted. It was recommitted. It's back in our hands, and I'll make an announcement about that in a moment.
Okay, so that's the one, and then there was a separate issue bill as well?
Yeah, it wasn't on cybersecurity. It was on green loans, a green loan fund. That was originally an administration bill, an MEA bill, and there was some miscommunication, shall we say. So we're going to try to put those two back together. If there are any significant changes, we'll bring it back to the committee, but I think it's a minor amendment.
Okay. Yeah, I just was trying to understand if both of them coming back to us.
No, that was special ordered for 2 days. So we can take the finance bill and our bill, which overlapped like 80%, some other changes, and if needed be, finance can pull their bill back or we can amend our bill. They were not brought back to committee. We're going to get some clarifying amendments probably, but I was going to let committee councils work that out. It's not a policy difference.
Okay, so I understand. One bill is being worked out between two committees, and the other bill, cybersecurity, is coming back here because we have multiple bills.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And while we're on it, I might as well make an announcement, and we're getting late. Given we had two cybersecurity bills early in the week, we had that 348 on the floor, and there are a couple more coming. And I want us to get it right. We could potentially have two different structures going on, one for the state agencies, one for the counties and the school systems. I want to make sure they fit together right and we have this policy right. So I am forming an ad hoc committee to look at cybersecurity, the three bills. I have a charge of certain questions they should answer. And while we can't deal with bills that are dropped and heard 3 or 4 weeks from now, I want to get us more focused on what our statement is and what our policy is. So I have asked Senator Freyhester to chair it, and while I haven't asked anyone, I'm asking Senator Washington to serve on it, Senator Riley, the vice chair, and Senator Simon Ayer, and Senator Hester, 5 people. I hope it's only 2 meetings. We need to get straight. I mean, we passed 348 to the floor, and I'm not sure we paid careful attention, including myself. And I'm not an expert in this stuff. So I'm hoping that we can get this all right and have a good policy coming out of EHE. So that's a long answer to a short question. And I can do part of it, and I have that outlined, so you do the initial stuff.
You want me to walk through the bill, or I was going to walk through the bill?
You're just going to go page by page, or you want to go to the issues?
I got it.
Okay, should I give this, it's got the page numbers to everybody? No, should I give them to them?
If you want to.
Okay. Okay. So stretch. It's dark. People have said I've been in the dark anyway. So. Okay.
So Senate Bill 414, Climate Solutions Now Act of 2021. I'm going to broadly go through what is in the bill. The chair just passed out a document that he prepared that sort of is a good kind of table of contents to the bill. But I'm roughly going to, I think, follow probably a similar breakdown and just kind of go through big picture what is in the bill and then run through some small amendments that the chairman has offered. The reprint that is on your page includes the chairman's amendments. His amendments are also on the last pages of the voting packet, the actual amendments themselves. So Senate Bill 414 makes broad changes to the state's approach to reducing statewide greenhouse gas emissions and addressing climate change. The bill's provisions fall into what I would say are 5 main categories. 1, measures related to tree plantings. 2, energy efficiency and clean energy measures. 3, electrification of the state bus and vehicle fleet. 4, greenhouse gas emissions reduction planning and monitoring. And 5, funding for climate initiatives. So again, just going to broadly kind of walk through each of those areas.
And, they may not be in the exact same order, but there are 5 key headings. I think once Council Morton says what topic, you can find the topic pretty easily and then go to the pages that are marked there. And I think we sent this to your office as well. Thank you.
So first I'll run through the tree planting provisions. These are on pages 40 through 51 of the bill. So the big picture, the bill establishes the policy of the state to support and encourage public and private tree plantings and reforestation efforts with a goal of planting 5 million trees in the state by the end of calendar year 2030. It further establishes the intent of the General Assembly that 500,000 of the 5 million trees should be planted in underserved areas as defined in the bill. The Maryland Department of the Environment, specifically a new position called the 5 Million Tree Program Coordinator, is responsible for tracking the state's progress and receiving data from the Maryland Department of Agriculture, the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and the Department of Natural Resources regarding tree planting efforts and making annual reports to the Maryland General Assembly. The governor is required to formally pledge the state's commitment to achieve goals through the tree planting goals through the U.S. chapter of the 1 Trillion Trees Initiative. There are a couple of specific programs and initiatives related to tree plantings. One is on page 43 through 45 of the bill. There's a Chesapeake Bay Trust Urban Trees program established. The Bay Trust is required to make grants to eligible organizations for tree planting projects in underserved areas. And the program is funded by Bay Restoration Fund allocations and any additional funds obtained or allocated by the trust. The trust is required to make annual reports to the Maryland Department of the Environment regarding grants awarded during the previous fiscal year. The second program is the CREP sign-up bonuses. This is I should have written down the, so this is the program run by the Maryland Department of Agriculture, conservation something. But anyhow, I do have it here. Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. To maximize participation in the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which is an existing program, in fiscal years 2022 through 2030 inclusive, a landowner who enrolls land planted with forested streamside buffers shall receive a one-time signing bonus of up to $1,000 per acre of land enrolled. That's on page 40 of the bill. Finally, the last kind of program and initiative related to tree plantings, the bill provides increased funding for technical assistance contractors and the Department of Natural Resources Forest Service. This is on page 42 of the bill. Funding for the tree planting provisions is provided in part by a carve-out from the Bay Restoration Fund. That's on page 46 of the bill. There's also a carve-out from the 2010 Bay Trust Fund. That's on page 42 of the bill. Finally, the bill establishes the Commission for the Innovation and Advancement of Carbon Markets and Sustainable Tree Plantings on pages 49 through 51. It establishes the Commission, which is chaired by the Maryland Department of the Environment, to study and make recommendations regarding meeting the 5 million tree goal and related issues. A report is due from the Commission by October 31st, 2022. Next, moving to the energy.
Let me just add two quick points on that before we leave trees. One, the purpose obviously is trees absorb carbon dioxide, and if you plant them at a buffer, it also helps clean up the bay in terms of absorbing things before they get into streams and rivers in the bay. And Senator Gallion, I know I'm anticipating, where we had maintenance of those trees in one or two of the areas, I have an amendment to make sure maintenance of the trees is also included as an appropriate expense. Because you're right, a lot of trees get overrun and they get killed. Okay, thank you.
So the next provisions I'm going to go through are the energy efficiency and clean energy provisions in the bill. The first has to do with energy conservation requirements for new buildings. This is on pages 23 through 25 of the bill. These requirements apply only to new construction of commercial and residential buildings with a gross floor area of 25,000 square feet or more, excluding the parking garage area. The requirements do not apply to public housing. On or before July 1st, 2022, the Department of Labor is required to adopt regulations establishing energy conservation requirements for covered buildings that will result in energy use reductions over the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code. Basically, the energy reductions step down, so there's a 30% reduction required by January 1st of 2024, 40% by 2027, 60% by 2030, and the new energy requirements should provide for new buildings constructed on or after 2033 to achieve a net zero energy balance. Also, on or before July 1st, 2022, the Department of Labor is required to adopt regulations requiring that certain covered buildings also be solar ready. And the bill defines what that means. It's essentially they have to be constructed in a way that solar panels, if the building is in an appropriate location where solar panels could be used, but that it be constructed in a way that solar panels could be installed at some point. Local jurisdictions are authorized to adopt more stringent requirements than the energy conservation requirements in the bill. Next provisions have to do with efficiency improvements for existing buildings. This is on pages 25 through 26 of the bill. Again, it applies to buildings with a gross floor area of 25,000 square feet or more, excluding the parking garage area. If a covered building, and this is again an existing building, is undergoing a major renovation as defined in the building must be renovated to achieve either a 40% reduction in the building's average energy use or a level of energy efficiency that is at least 20% higher than what would be required for a new building. A local jurisdiction may waive the requirements if a building owner can demonstrate that the cost of improvements necessary to achieve the reductions would exceed the expected 15-year return on investment. The next provisions have to do with energy modeling for new construction. This is on page 27 of the bill. Requires the Department of Labor to adopt regulations directing local jurisdictions to require energy life cycle cost estimates for all new buildings. The life cycle cost estimates produced in accordance with the regulations must be made available to the Department of Labor and taken into consideration when the state revises the Maryland Building Performance Standards or the Energy Code.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to let Ms. Morton go through it. Just mark, dog ear the page if you have a question. We'll come back to any questions you have or underline.
The next kind of category of the building provisions have to do with high performance buildings. These are found in a couple of places in the bill. First, pages 28 through 31 have to do generally with high performance buildings. These are buildings that are being constructed using state funds. Pages 9 through 10 of the bill have to do specifically with school construction. And pages 33 through 34 establish a net zero school loan fund to help fund the school provisions. So these provisions extend high-performance building requirements to capital projects funded with 25% state funding. Currently, the requirements for high-performance buildings only apply to 100% funded or projects funded with 100% state funding. Going forward, high-performance building requirements must include compliance with the LEED net zero or equivalent standards established by the Maryland Green Building Council. But there are special provisions for school construction. So school buildings in general are not required to reach the to meet the net zero requirements, with the following exceptions. At least one school constructed in each local school system from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2030 must be constructed to meet net zero energy requirements. So this is on pages 9 through 10 of the bill. Net zero requirements, furthermore, only apply subject to the availability of funding from the Net Zero School Loan Fund. And the Net Zero School Loan Fund is established to provide no-interest loans to school systems to cover the difference in cost between meeting the basic high-performance building requirements, which they're already required to meet, and the new net zero requirements. Furthermore, schools not built to meet the net zero requirements must also be solar ready.
Let me just stop and give a little explanation. The state kicks in a fair amount of money for school construction. If a school puts solar on its roof, for example, the upfront cost will come back at whether it's 6, 7, or 8 years, and after that they make a savings on their electric costs. A net zero means that your usage equals what you save, essentially. So if you use geothermal or have enough solar, you would be a net zero school. We do not require every school to be net zero. At least one of the first 5 should be. Some people may say it might reduce how many other schools we can build. Even though in the out years, they're going to save money. But we say the rest of the schools must be solar ready, so when they're designed, they should be designed so solar panels could be put on the roof later at the appropriate time, if it's not a shaded area, if it's, if it shows south, and all their HVAC system can be put in such a way. But it also sets up a fund to help underwrite the initial costs. So that's what we try to do there.
So the next provisions of the bill have to do with the existing Empower Maryland program. This is on page 28 of the bill. This requires utilities to achieve energy savings of 3% per year, up from the current law requirement, which is 2% per year. The next provisions related to clean energy are on page 39 of the bill. These provisions create a tax exemption for certain community solar equipment. It exempts machinery and equipment from local personal property tax if it, one, is installed on rooftops, parking lots, roadways, or brownfield locations, and two, is part of a community solar energy generating system that serves more than 51% of kilowatt hour output to low and moderate income customers. If anybody's wondering where that language comes from, that's an existing sort of definition that's used for the community solar energy program. The next sort of broad category of provisions in the bill have to do with zero emissions vehicles and the state vehicle fleet. So on pages 36 through 39 of the bill, you'll find provisions dealing with zero emissions buses. If these seem familiar, it's because we heard a bill, I think, last week that contained basically identical provisions, requiring, beginning in fiscal year 2023, that any new bus acquired by the Maryland Transportation Authority to be a zero-emission bus. These provisions also require annual reports to various committees on schedules for converting the state bus fleet to zero-emission buses, the evaluation of infrastructure needs, plan for transitioning state employees affected by transition to zero-emission buses, and estimates of emissions reductions resulting from the transition, as well as financial analyses. The bill also specifies that the cost of the buses is to be paid from the Transportation Trust Fund. Next, on pages 31 through 33 of the bill, there are provisions dealing with zero-emission light-duty vehicles in the state vehicle fleet. In each,
Light duty are the cars that each agency owns and uses for their staff.
In each fiscal year from 2022 through 2024 inclusive, at least 50% of light-duty vehicles purchased for the state fleet must be zero-emission vehicles. And then beginning in fiscal 2025, all light-duty vehicles purchased for the state vehicle fleet must be zero-emission vehicles. There is an exception in the bill that says that if there's a vehicle has sort of a special use where a zero-emission vehicle wouldn't be appropriate, then the requirement does not apply. Establishes the intent of the General Assembly that the entire state fleet of light-duty vehicles be zero-emission vehicles by 2030, and requires annual reporting from the Chief Procurement Officer regarding the state's progress towards meeting these goals.
And let me just explain that this does not say they have to go out and sell their 4,000 cars. When they finish their life cycle, 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, and the car is either sold and it's replaced, it'll be replaced with a zero emissions electric vehicle. So there will be a marginal cost, which is taken elsewhere, but it's not saying they have to do a wholesale dumping of their fleet. It'll be phased in as cars hit their whatever that life cycle is, and I think there are about 4,000 cars.
The next category of provisions in the bill have to do with emissions reduction goals, planning, and monitoring. So first, on pages 14 through 18, we have changes to the state greenhouse gas emissions reduction planning requirements. The bill establishes new targets of achieving a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in the state by 2030, with final plan due December 31st, 2022. It also establishes a target that the state be net zero by 2045, with a final plan due December 31st, 2030. The plan is to be reviewed and updated on or before December 31st, 2035. The targets in the bill sunset in 2025 to give the General Assembly an opportunity to review those targets closer to 2025 to determine if they're still appropriate. The bill also includes some plan specifications, specifically prohibiting the plan from relying on highway widening or carbon capture and storage technology, and there is an amendment related to that provision that we'll get to. Requires that the plan use a 20-year time horizon for methane emissions. The plan includes specific estimates on reductions expected from each measure, and a couple of other provisions. The next category in this sort of broad planning category has to do with the environmental justice considerations. These are found primarily in pages 10 through 14 of the bill. The bill requires the existing Environmental Justice Commission within the Maryland Department of the Environment to identify a methodology based on various economic, social, and health considerations to identify communities disproportionately affected by climate change. They're also required to develop specific recommendations to address environmental justice concerns, reduce emissions of greenhouse gases and co-pollutants, and build resilience in disproportionately affected communities. They're required to set goals for the percentage of state funding for greenhouse gas emissions reductions measures that should be used for the benefit of disproportionately affected communities. In developing these recommendations, they are required to hold at least 6 public meetings, 3 in urban settings and 3 in rural settings, and solicit public input. The bill does allow those meetings to be held virtually during states of emergency. The Commission is required to report its findings and recommendations to the General Assembly on or before December 31st, 2022. Kind of going hand in hand with those provisions, on page 22 of the bill, the Maryland Department of the Environment is required, beginning in 2022, to prepare and include in its annual report to the Maryland Commission on Climate Change an analysis of the total state funding spent on greenhouse gas emissions reductions measures in the previous fiscal year, and the percentage of that funding that has benefited disproportionately affected communities identified according to the criteria developed by the Environmental Justice Commission. Next, the bill establishes the Just Transition Employment Retraining Working Group, which is established under the Maryland Commission on Climate Change for the purpose of studying and advising on various issues and opportunities related to the transition to a clean energy economy. So these have to do, provisions having to do with workforce development and training and education for green jobs. The report is due to the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, December 31st, 2022. Next, the bill includes provisions that have to do with monitoring methane emissions from landfills. This is on page 14 of the bill. Mostly these provisions have to do with requiring the Department of the Environment to more fully incorporate emissions data gathered from aircraft observation into their sort of oversight and monitoring of methane emissions. Finally, the last piece of the bill, the last broad category, has to do with funding, particularly changes to the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. This is on pages 34 through 36 of the bill. This is the fund that receives money from the RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative auctions. So the bill requires that at least $500,000 per year within the Strategic Energy Investment Fund go to the Healthy Soils Program, which is an existing program in the Department of Agriculture. It also requires that proceeds in excess of the first $50 million that go into the Strategic Energy Investment Fund be diverted to a climate solutions account for use in implementing the bill. No more than 20 million may be deposited into the Climate Solutions account in a fiscal year. So the idea is if more than $50 million comes into the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, it starts funneling into this new account up to $20 million. Subject to the availability of funding in the account in fiscal year 2022 through 2030, $6 million per year shall be transferred to the Net Zero School Loan Fund for the purposes we've already kind of gone over. And in any year that funds in the account are not sufficient to fully fund all the programs outlined in the bill, allocations are required to be prioritized in the following order: incremental cost of purchasing zero-emission light-duty vehicles, allocations to Net Zero School Loan Fund, administrative costs of the Department of the Environment, and administrative costs of the Department of Labor. And that is the bill.
Let's stop.
Can you repeat that?
No.
Let's start to take some questions and for a few minutes, and then we'll pick it up next week. But if there's some outstanding questions that you're confused or want clarity, let's try to answer some of them. It's 10 of. We'll go to 5 or 5 after at the latest, and then we'll pick it up next week. Senator Riley, followed by Senator Carrozza.
Is there any special reason you didn't break this into more bite-sized pieces?
It's complicated.
I know it is.
No, I meant why I put it all together. Part of the reason this bill does 30,000 feet to 60% reduction, which is an umbrella. But I also felt, having been on the Climate Commission, that we needed to require some very concrete actions, because I've experienced a lot of talk, but not as many actions as I would like. And I've tried to take best practices from around the country and put them in. So is it soup to nuts? I mean, I've been criticized by other people who say you don't have X, Y, and Z in here. And then, of course, some say you've done too much. You know, I had to make a judgment call of having an omnibus bill or having 10 different bills. We'll take as long as we need to walk through it today or next week. That's all. And there are a couple bills, like the transportation bill, the bus bill. If we want to move the bus bill and edit that out, I'm fine. I just want to get it done. I don't have to take credit for it. So there are a couple of bills where there are bills that deal with some subsets of these floating around out there.
And to follow up on that, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
It sounds like this is the type of bill which will need extensive numbers of testifying people. The public testimony. Oh, we had that? Okay, never mind.
It's a written testimony. I think 25 were favorable and 4 or 5 were not. And I've met with PEPCO and I've met with the builders to hear further concerns. I think Senator Carrozza, then I'm going to come back to you, Senator Patterson.
Mr. Chairman, I know that you put a lot of work in this, and I think all of us who are trying to do our tabs, and I mean, this is a very multifaceted, complex bill, and if you haven't been living it day in and day out, you're really feeling a little bit at a disadvantage here because of the far-reaching impacts on local government, state government, private sector. And as far as, I think the reason we've been raising questions about work groups and breaking the bill down is, to really try to, number one, try to work through it in a way when most of us have been focused on COVID-19 recovery and trying to think in making that our first priority, and then something like this, when you realize the impact that it will have, the importance and the impact, it feels very overwhelming. And so when we come back and we're asking what we think are reasonable requests to break down in work groups, I mean, I'm trying right now, the hearing that we had, and again, I realize under Zoom times what it looks like, but we had one person orally testify in opposition. We have a lot of written testimony that, we, have been told we need to go through. Some of us are trying to literally take the sections of this bill and match the concerns in opposition and put it in and trying to work it out, not being an expert on these issues. So I believe we're making some reasonable requests on how we work through something like this, whether we break it down, whether we have a work group. But I have to tell you, after, to pick this up and go through this on a Friday afternoon after the week we've had, and knowing that I believe that our top priority should be COVID-19 recovery, I just, we're just trying to ask for reasonable requests on how to work through this and a reasonable request, and maybe we break some of this down. It just seems very, very multifaceted, complex bill, all in one product, and difficult to deal with it at this time.
I would also say, before I call on Senator Patterson, a version of this bill was addressed and introduced last year and actually passed this committee last year. It then went to B&T and it didn't get to the floor with the COVID. It shouldn't be totally new. And the MACO and MML and all these groups have seen it. So I think those people you want to consult with, you should. As I said at the outset, I think having to walk through this with 4 or 5 people in the environmental committee and then having to walk through it with everyone else, we'd be replicating. So we're going to take it. If it takes us a little while longer, we'll just have longer voting sessions. But I wanted to begin to get through it. And Relief Act is gone. It's out of the Senate chamber. And I didn't even want to move this before that bill was cleared off the floor. So we'll deal with it as we can. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I must admit, though, this is quite an undertaking. This is an in-depth piece of legislation that's going to require many hours to study and comprehend and get some sense of understanding where all this is leading. I've heard you go through like the school construction. I feel like that's an area that's almost would require a setting of its own. They're talking about that. And then, too, I look at this and I say, well, I got 2 or 3 bills in environmental matters. Will this be the great hope that's going to oversee and wipe up all the issues that we sweated on and met with community people to get legislation sponsored to enhance our communities? I mean, I don't know. But I'm sure we'll do what we have to do. But goodness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First thing, just to clarify, as far as just going through and discussing it before we actually take a vote, will we have like another day next week to do more before the vote? I mean, I just like, if we could have a little heads up before the actual voting session when we're actually going to vote up or down on it.
Yeah, I have Jim's schedule next week.
All right.
What days are voting sessions and how many hours they'll be.
But the very next voting session, we won't be actually, we'll probably still be talking. Are we going to stay here and do it all tonight? I'm just curious how.
We're going to end.
Okay. 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 So I have time for a couple questions tonight, though. Okay. Great. Okay. Oh man. So I guess the first question would, you mentioned you're going to, with the tree maintenance, you have an amendment coming for that.
Yes, there are 3 tree programs. One, or you include the money being used not just for there are like 2 or 3 different tree programs, Senator. 1 or 2 already say that the money can be used not just for planting the trees, but for managing and maintenance is the word. There was 1 or 2 it wasn't explicit that the money could be used for maintenance, and I'm going to offer an amendment to do just that.
Okay. And on some of those existing programs, this may have to happen in a different bill, or I don't know how much jurisdiction we have on this, but would there be a way to go back and look at those and make sure that maintenance is a priority on those? Because if you have 2 or 3 other programs and only one of the 3 programs is doing proper maintenance, the other 2 programs will be wasting a lot of time and energy if they're not maintaining these trees correctly.
Yeah, Senator, we can't solve every ill.
Right.
I mean, there's a special fund for this. It's a new program. We're going to take care of this new program and make sure these trees get a start. I don't think we can solve.
Right.
If DNR is not handling some forest in Garrett County, that's beyond our control, I think.
So for the tree planting part, how much of that would you think would have to be on private land? I mean, it's a huge number. Is it going to be like half of the planting on? Do you have any idea, or is that?
I don't. We leave it open on public or private land. Some of the people who worked on this might have a better sense of that. I mean, there's enough acreage to put up the 5 million trees. And there are actually some incentives we put, $1,000 per acre for farmers who have some fallow land who want to put up trees. So we have some incentives for people who want to do it. We don't say 50 on public and 50 on private. We don't set a number.
Okay, and I'm all for planting trees, but my understanding there's like 10 different tree planting best management practices already on the books in these different programs. Did we possibly look at maybe making those programs better instead of this bill potentially like competing with those? Is there a way that we could work with those and make sure everything's kind of cohesive and working together instead of like doubling efforts or stretching out? I was just curious how this fit in with the current programs.
The plan was to plant 5 million additional trees, and they've done calculations as to how much carbon dioxide it takes from the air, which takes less pressure off other places to reduce. So this is 5 million trees above and beyond other commitments and other programs.
And on the funds, I think there was mention of like the Bay Trust Fund and the Atlantic Coastal Bay Trust Fund. I'm not tremendously familiar with those programs, but if you take money from those funds and put to this, what could be negatively effective with that money going away that would have been going to something else that's already being used for now? In other words, wouldn't you need that money in addition to what's in that fund, or else you'd be hurting other programs?
Well, a large part of the money is coming from the Bay Restoration Fund. And they put money out. They're the ones that pay for wastewater treatment plants and other initiatives, septic systems, et cetera. And they have shown, we have received a briefing, that there is the $15 million above and beyond that available for other projects. So we don't think it's taken from other projects.
Okay. And back to the trees on private lands. I know in my area, a lot of folks, when they go to buy a farm or something, they look at those trees, and I think it's like every 20 years you can go in and like they cut down some of the trees and they sell some of that lumber to help pay for their costs. With this bill, after 20 years, can they use some of that lumber if it's on the private lands for they do for boards and paper, all kinds of stuff?
I don't believe so, but we'll check into that.
Okay, and then
because the more tree cover, the more we're going to be able to breathe and not have asthma. I mean, the problem in Brazil, they're cutting down all the damn trees.
Right.
And so we want to have a net add, not just a net neutral.
Right. On page 37, I noticed one thing with the electric vehicles, and it said it had to be a 55 mile per hour maximum speed. I mean, we have highways at the speed limit 65, And if these things only go 55 miles an hour, that, it seems to me like that would be a problem. They kind of get in the way. Right. So that's a minimum. So if they just reach that minimum, they're only at 55.
This is,
I thought that was on the car.
No, this one, that's in the transportation. So the provisions on, the provisions in the transportation article are just related to buses.
Okay, thanks for clearing that. And just the last thing, just a comment. I like the fact about having some funding in there, additional funding, it looks like, for the healthy soils. I'm on that committee, and that's a really, really good thing. So that's all for now. I mean, it's a big thing. I'm still working my way through it, too. It's taking a little while, so thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at this bill, listening to the bill read by council, I went back to when I was a little kid in Jamaica, and we didn't have any street lights, and my dad my parents had one of the few vehicles in our country area in Jamaica, and we would go driving at night, and it was so dark. I thought my dad was such a hero to be able to drive in the dark and get us safely there. I mean, this bill, I'm impressed with you in that situation right there. Example, to be able to get so many things in it and technical and address so many issues. And so I'm in awe of you to be able to do this. And I was just going through a couple questions. Real quick.
For your questions, you need to understand, we met with architects about doing buildings. We met with the Bay Foundation, who understands trees. I don't have all that expertise. We went to lots of people to get input, and we looked at what New York has done. I mean, this didn't come from my head, trust me.
Right. Okay, well, you just kind of put a little pin in that balloon. But anyway, but I look at a couple of things like the testimony, and it seems like a lot of our friends in labor are not in favor of this, and I'm trying to understand why. What's their issue from your perspective? What's their issue with this bill? The mic, Mr. Chairman.
I met with about 8 union presidents virtually last Monday. Look, their concern is the more we electrify and get clean energy, there are union members who work in coal-fired power plants or on gas lines or on oil refinery, whatever, are going to be out of a job. And they're concerned about their members. Just like when people started going after tobacco workers said, whoops, we're going to be out of work. So they're concerned about what that transition looks like. They don't want to take someone who's got 25 years on the job, send them to community college, and then they get a job for $30,000 or $40,000 when they're making 70 or 80 now. So that's their concern. I mean, philosophically, they want a clean environment for they and their kids. But they are concerned about, as we move in that direction, a green direction, they can't tell the members, oh, too bad. And that's why we put in this just transition work group. I want to have labor at the table. I want to have management. I want the state government. I want all these people to figure out, how do we make a transition in our state over the next 2, 5, and 10 years? In other words, if someone's got 20 or 25 years in and they close the coal-fired power plant, are we going to say too bad? Are they owed any salary or guaranteed salary for a year or two? Is just community college enough training for them? So I don't have an answer for them. I can't magically say we're going to pay everyone $100,000 for the next 5 years. It would be $1 billion. So they're concerned about members losing jobs, and I get that. But in the last 3 months, the owners of 5 of the 6 coal-fired power plants, one in Montgomery County, 2, I don't know if Brandon Shores is affected by it, they've announced they're closing. So those people are going to be out of jobs anyway. So they're worried, having a 60% reduction in 2 or 5 or 8 years, some of their people might not be needed. So that's their primary concern. And I hear it. And I want us to have a thoughtful conversation of how we have a systematic transition. So.
Okay, thank you for that. And one really technical question. On page 39, it refers to brownfields. And so we had an issue come up with the solar farm in my county, in Charles County. And they're saying, hey, you should not be cutting down trees and to put in solar. You should put on brownfield. And when I challenged some environmental activists to give me a location of a brownfield, no one to this day have come up with one. Is this just a technical concept, or these things actually exist? And do we have any in Maryland, any brownfields?
In urban situations, old factories that produce something, it's leached into the ground. And Ms. Morton knows more than I. You're probably not going to find them in suburban areas. Most would be in Baltimore. Not all, but most. Ms. Morton, could you elaborate?
Would that include under power transmission lines?
I'm sorry?
On the brownfield, we had this issue in North Harford County. Would that include, say, where you have already like big power lines going through? That would be considered a brownfield, correct?
I
Or
think so, but I'm going to defer.
Right. So brownfield, it's areas where there have been controlled hazardous substances have been present in the past. Again, this language in that you referenced on page 39 is simply like quoting essentially existing language that has to do with the community solar program. There are already incentives in state law for developing solar generating stations on brownfield sites, and part of the reason for that is because those sites are difficult to redevelop because they had hazardous substances there, so you have to do some environmental remediation before you can use them for anything. So again, that's kind of parroting that provision, which has to do, again, with this personal property tax exemption. It's trying to get at this very narrow category of community solar plants that are serving low-income individuals. And again, it's just talking about the panels attached to rooftops, parking lots, roadways, and brownfields.
Does that help, Senator Ellis?
And you can find, the Maryland Department of the Environment does have a list of active and archived brownfield sites, and they're all over the states. I mean, it's old landfills, anything where a hazardous substance might have been in the environment at some point. There's a 125-page spreadsheet of brownfield sites.
Senator Ellis.
Chairman, and so on this bill, will we clean up those brownfields, or we will leave them with the toxic substances and then put solar on it, or what is the plan for that through this bill?
The bill doesn't do anything with brownfield sites. It's the current law already there are incentives for putting solar generating stations on brownfield sites, and before you do that, you do have to do some environmental, at least containment or remediation to the site. You can't just slap a solar panel on a contaminated site.
Okay, thanks.
We're going to take one question, then we'll adjourn or recess. Vice Chairwoman.
I actually put my light on a million years ago, but these have been great questions and stuff. I wanted to speak to Senator Patterson, Senator Carrozza's comments. I understand I'm not expert at this stuff, and I need to learn a lot about this too. Number one, I trust the expertise of all the people who have helped work on this, but I just wanted to remind colleagues that last year we did the Kerwin Commission, and Budget and Taxation just did the Relief Act. So we do big bills without going to subcommittee, without, too much trauma and drama, but it's important, and I really have appreciated April going through this and giving it to us in 5 categories. That was really helpful to me, and I look forward to the ongoing conversation so we can continue to learn about this. So that was just my perspective, Senators.
And in closing, obviously you can talk to any interested stakeholders, whether they like it or don't like it, which you do anyway. But secondarily, Ms. Morton, committee counsel, knows this bill very well. She drafted most of it, if not all of it. She can explain stuff to you. She's not going to tell you, to like it or not to like it, but she can explain the bill to you. And the other person who knows it very well is Ian in my office. So if you really want to take 20 minutes or a half hour in a section to better understand it, there are people around who can do that for you. Okay, thank you. We went later than I wanted to. We did get some work done, and come Tuesday, we had said there'll be 2 voting sessions next week. Tuesday or Wednesday, most likely Wednesday, because we'd have to send you the voting list by Monday afternoon, but it'll be Tuesday or Wednesday, one of those days, and then another on Friday. And I hate to do it, but we have a lot of bills. We had about 40 or 50 this week. So thank you. Relax over the weekend. De-stress and stay safe.